So in my last post, I spoke about intermittent fasting specifically for women, and I said that I would cover more ground in this post. And I want to remind you again that women are much more sensitive hormonally to caloric restriction than men are, so you have to be really cautious. Make sure you feel good on it. If you don't, stop it. So be prepared to experiment, but end it if it doesn't feel like it's right for you. I did want to say that it's important that you don't eat late in the day, so it's better to fast earlier than eating later. And when we talk about fasting, obviously you've got a fasting period and then you've got an eating period. So you want your fasting period to start earlier in the evening rather than later in the evening, and that's just because if you eat late at night, you've got all this energy you're packing into the fuels, but you're not actually processing it very efficiently, and you can actually cause some problems. It's not a benign thing. There are negatives that come out of that, but also think about it. We tend to be much more snacky in the evenings with crappy foods like crisps and chocolate and that kind of thing. So snacking late at night is probably going to be a bit of a dangerous affair. So a couple of options you've got in terms of fasting. One is what they call a crescendo fast, which is 2 to 3 times a week, around 12 to 16 hours, and then your feeding period is 8 to 12 hours. So you can decide how long you want it to be. It's literally 2 or 3 times a week, and that sort of suits most women, I think, from a point of view of not pushing them too hard on the fasting. Then there's a full day fast, which is literally a 24-hour once or twice a week, but I'm not wild about that. I find my clients I personally struggle with that. I haven't found any of my clients have wanted to do that as an option, so I don't think it's a great one. Might work for you. There's the 5-2, which is basically 5 normal days a week of eating, and then twice a week you eat only 25% of what you normally eat. So it's 2 sort of very low calorie days and 5 full days. I don't like that either, because I think I hate clients having to think about calories, and also I think it just gets them back on the diet wagon with that mentality around, oh, I've got to watch what I eat and weigh it and whatever, you know what I mean by that. So I'm not wild about that option. But the protocol that I follow is actually Dr. David Yocker's protocol, and I like it. It's manageable. Basically, from and this is if you're menstruating, day 1 to day 10. So in other words, from the day you start bleeding to day 10, you are going to employ intermittent fasting, and you're going to eat very low carbs, so around about 30 grams or less of carbs in a day. And then from day 11 to day around 14, 15, 16, depending on when you ovulate, you can stop fasting. So don't do fasting, bring in a morning meal, and you can take your carb intake up to around 80 to 200 80 to 200 grams, depending on how active you are. So if you're massively active, go 200. If you're not really that active, stay at around 80. Then whenever your ovulation finishes, from that day until day 22, you're going back to employing fasting with very low carb intake, which is below 30 grams or 30 grams or below. And then day 23 until you start to bleed again, so let's say around day 28, you're going to do the same thing as you did during ovulation. So you're not going to fast anymore, and you're going to bring in your higher carbs, so 80 to 200 grams again. So that gives you quite a nice protocol to follow, and that follows your hormones, by the way. I haven't spoken about that in detail, but it's where you produce lots of estrogen. You're much more insulin sensitive, and when you don't produce much of it, you are less sensitive to it, or less sensitive to insulin. So there's a whole thing going on there. So it's nice to follow that. And then the last thing I wanted to say is don't fast if you're nursing, if you're pregnant, if you've experienced or are experiencing disordered eating. It's a little, that's just another way to control eating, so it's not a good idea. If you have some sort of infection, or if you're under chronic stress, or if you're underweight. If none of those apply to you, then by all means go ahead, give it a try, good luck, and I'll see you again soon.